All right, everybody. Welcome back to Marauder Mondays Live. Yes, I am your host, Magic Prepper, and doing an intro like this just seems completely unnatural. But if you can hear me, please say something in the comments that you can hear me and everything looks and sounds good, because it is hard for me to tell without giving a weird feedback, echoey kind of a deal here on the show, which is, I guess, what this is, a show. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. I do want to go ahead and, okay, I see you guys saying you can hear me. Comms are good. Okay, good to hear. All right, thank you so much. The title, I guess, of today's live stream is The Urban Decay is Spreading, okay? Urban decay is obviously a sociological issue where cities tend to fall apart in certain areas due to lack of a lot of different things: resources, leadership, the ability to maintain the functionality of a certain area of a city, and obviously things, degrade and eventually turn into some kind of a quagmire. So that being said, there's a very slight echo. All right, Bill Morrow, thanks for letting me know about that. I'll see what I can do about it, but I believe I'm on the right microphone. Who knows? There's so many microphones, but there's really just two. Anyway, I wanted to go ahead and touch base on, what's going on in the country right now, based on the fact that it's not being reported on as much as you think it would be, as for like the level of degradation that we're seeing in the cities. And this urban decay is actually becoming a real problem for those who actually live in the city. Now, there's a lot of us here who live in rural environments, so it's easy to turn the other eye and just assume that these problems don't even really exist, or that they're isolated and that they're easy to avoid. But for those of you who live in an urban environment, make sure you check in and let us know just how things are looking in your area. But I'm sure that you'll be able to surprise some of the other members here in the chat about the fact that this is something you can't necessarily escape, that in many cities, a lot of people basically, have a daily interaction with homeless people. They have a daily interaction with crime. They have a daily interaction with something negative when they're walking down the street, or when they're on their way to work, or when they're taking their kids to school, or whatever it might be. And this is basically an indicator of where things are headed. And it's something we need to discuss. Now, like I've said before, Marauder Mondays, we're trying to also lighten the mood a little bit, have a good time, and let's have a chat. So I want you guys to make sure to put questions or opinions or anything that you want to talk about in the chat, so we can kind of get everybody into the conversation. And obviously, there's a lot of really good people in the chat that can answer other questions that I might not be able to get to. So make sure you use this live stream as like a network to talk to other people who know a lot about preparedness, that are willing to maybe help you out with some of the questions you might have, in case I can't get to it, okay? And so we're looking at some of the chat here, and I see people saying things like Atlanta has gotten worse crime-wise. We now avoid going there. That's from John Pander. Thanks for letting me know. And people are experiencing that in all kinds of urban areas. And it's an issue because basically they're not being managed properly, and things are falling apart, and people are no longer able to earn incomes or keep their housing or whatever might happen. And I have a feeling that this whole urban decay scenario that we're witnessing is going to get exponentially worse once we see this eviction moratorium end, which ends in 5 days. Now, of course, a lot of these other states have decided to end the moratorium sooner, and a lot of people are basically avoiding dealing with federal law when it comes to some of those situations. But in the major metropolitan areas, especially in the states that lean more liberally, aka New York and California, you're going to see a lot of these things start to happen once those CDC guidelines fade away. And that's what everyone's been kind of waiting for. And like I've said in the past, it is interesting timing when you see these advanced child tax credits come out right before the eviction moratoriums, because they're just never going to stop this never-ending buffet of money given out to everybody in order to try to keep this whole thing rolling. Because right now, the more money we give out and the more of these programs you see being put into place, it's just us basically struggling to stay afloat. We're gasping for air, and we're just trying to hope that we can push this thing down the road a little bit further. And you shouldn't look at it as being a positive situation. Yes, some of us out there definitely need the help and need the money, and I totally understand that. But we should look at it as an indicator of we're on the edge right now of the cliff, and we're just basically hanging on by one finger. And the only reason that finger hasn't given out is because we're pumping it full of steroids made out of cash, which is a legit thing. I can tell you that right now. Okay, so let's see here. Matt G, are you still demonized? I believe you meant demonetized, and I will say yes to both. Okay, so, but yes, I am still demonetized currently. Let's see. In Maine, there's another coin shortage. Jeremiah Flick mentioned that. Yes, there's coin shortages everywhere. Cash is not being given out at grocery stores and big box stores. And yes, we are transitioning to a digital currency most likely. Let's see here. Everybody's talking about a little bit of the echo. So I'm not exactly sure what's causing it, but I do have a noise canceling feature and I do have a decently legit microphone here. So not sure what's causing all that. And I apologize if it is hard to listen to as of right now, but we are still kind of working the kinks out here. 76 says, are lockdowns coming again this fall or winter? What's your opinion? So we can see what's happening in Europe right now where things are starting to get a little bit crazier in the streets because people are against the idea of doing this whole roundabout merry-go-round situation once again. And a lot of people are upset about it because it feels like a never-ending cycle of power grab, basically. So things are happening right now. And whether or not you agree with the aspect or the concept of doing these lockdowns, whatever it might be, based on different variants or whatever else is out there, doesn't make a huge difference. What matters is that people are no longer willing to adhere to it, and in the future, that might come back to bite us, aka the boy who cried wolf story. So we're having a lot of problems when it comes to that, and the whole population over in Europe and a lot of countries is starting to lose their minds because they're not willing to do it anymore. It's ruined so many businesses and livelihoods, and so many people's mental health, and so many other things have happened during this whole entire situation that I don't think people are willing to make it happen once again. And that is something we probably will deal with here in the fall and the winter, because it will be the time that will be the easiest to implement it once again. And they're trying their best to get everybody on board and pump it in the media and let everybody know what's happening on a consistent basis. So when that time comes, there won't be as much vitriol surrounding it. Although I assume there will be quite a bit no matter what we do. So let's see here. Now, one thing I do want to say is I am actually working on having more guests here on the live stream. I had Rudy from Alaska Prepper last week. I am inviting other people in the preparedness community to be on Marauder Mondays as well. So I'm looking forward to getting some more of those confirmations before I can advertise them to you guys. But I do have some things in the works with some other creators. So I am actually very excited about that. And I just wanted to mention it because it is something that I think is, nice to have that dynamic, have a conversation with somebody else's perspective and opinion on situations that might change my mind, might change your mind, or might just kind of reinforce what we already thought. So I'm always looking for new perspectives, and I'm, open to other ideas. If you guys have any, you can leave them in the chat or even email me at magicprepper@gmail.com. So that way we can get some more ideas about how to make Marauder Mondays even better. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to get back in the chat here for a minute, and then I'm going to talk to you guys about more of this whole urban decay scenario, okay? So let's see. I am lost in the chat. So the lockdown situation keeps coming up, and what people are saying is that it's just not going to go well, and that is exactly my determination as well. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Now, the urban decay scenario, the reason I want to bring this up is because if you don't live in an urban environment, it's easy to ignore it. And it is something that we need to consider as being a real issue, because there's only so much that can actually happen in the sense of management when it comes to large groups of people who are willing to rough it basically and live in a way that doesn't necessarily mesh with society. And then eventually that large group of people becomes unmanageable and there's no longer a good answer as to what to do. And what we're seeing happening with a lot of different cities right now is that they're trying to take a moral or ethical approach as to what to do with the people who have been displaced or don't have income or have mental illness or whatever it is that it might be that caused them to be in that situation in the first place. And then find somewhere else for them to go. And that's going to be the biggest thing that we need to consider, because one big thing that we like to think about in this community, and maybe it's a mistake, but it's something we need to discuss, is that often we have this idea that nothing's going to happen out in the country, right? And this is something that I recently talked about in a different video, but when these people are displaced, there's only so many places for them to go. And when you keep moving large groups of people down the road, further and further they go, the more it starts to affect people who thought they would never have to be affected by those things. And this is what we're seeing happening. It's one of the biggest struggles that these municipalities are dealing with. And it kind of reminds me of you know, Rambo in a way. You know, he was just trying to mind his own business and gets kicked out of town and then just gets pushed further and further out into the sticks until he's finally living in the woods. And I guarantee you somebody probably owned some of those woods he was living in. So that person was probably pretty unhappy to find out that there was a basically war zone created by the National Guard and Rambo out in the middle of the forest. And that's exactly what, you know, is a good, I guess, you know, metaphor for what we could be seeing at some point in time. Okay. So, I also wanted to bring this up because I have good friends back in the Sacramento area of California, and I talk to them regularly. And recently I was chatting with one of my friends, and he wanted to let me know about some of the stuff going on there and basically just inform me that every day you can find more and more tent cities popping up, and every day you can find more encampments, and every day there's some kind of additional crime occurring due to these tent cities and these encampments, or even just the surrounding concept of them, because there is a lot of drug use and things like that that happens around those areas. So because of all this, basically the entire area is slowly turning into a large encampment, because if you walk a quarter mile in any direction and you can find one, it's only a matter of time until they connect and become something larger, aka a community. And then trying to relocate that community or trying to move the community in any way or trying to get rid of it in some way or another, it becomes almost impossible, especially when the way that the law is being enforced is in a way that doesn't allow for anything unethical, which is something that's decided by people who are in power, not by the people who are actually affected by these things. So let's see here. All right, so looks like we're still talking about the sound a little bit. Maybe I'll just do a little bit more mastering down the road here, guys, all right? I'm still working the kinks out, not a live stream pro, but I will say I at least decently understand technology, and I may or may not have used a microphone from time to time throughout my life. So that being said, yeah, I think I can probably do a little bit better, and I do appreciate the feedback on that, because without anybody telling me about it, how am I supposed to know? Okay, so let's see. Now, one of the things that I do see here in the chat is like Bishop Tactical says they're looking for a MAG in North Carolina, aka Mutual Assistance Group. So this is another good thing to use these live streams for. Network with people who are in here or in your area and try your best to feel that there's a way you guys can maybe connect and have at least some kind of an idea of somebody down the road or nearby or in the next county or wherever it may be to rely on during an emergency, because honestly, like-minded people are harder and harder to come by, especially if you're in the larger population areas. Things are definitely changing in our cultural dynamic to a point where it's almost difficult to talk about some of this stuff at times, because next thing you know, you're an extremist. So just be careful, right? Okay, so I do want to say that basically, you know, thanks to my friend bringing this up, I started looking into more of this whole urban decay scenario that we're witnessing. I'll go ahead and give you guys some ideas about some of the different things I've been reading. And like I say every time, not every source that I utilize is some, you know, vetted, amazing, you know, propaganda, ideology-proof source, but it is something that's just worth understanding that the information is being put out there by someone, which means that there's something to be shared. Whether or not it is all completely accurate is a different story. But we have to do our best to monitor the things that we ingest and then put them back out in a way that makes sense to us, and, you know, without diving too far into things that, you know, obviously are just led by ideology. So let's see here. So this is one of the articles I was looking at, right? And it was about cities grappling with homelessness as tent clusters proliferate, okay? Proliferate. Why did I say that so weird? Anyway, one thing that I want to mention is that these tent clusters, these tent cities, once they exist, they're super difficult to deal with, because basically you're talking about people's living situation. It's no longer just a tent. It's no longer just a piece of dirt that has somebody's blanket on top of it. We're talking these people literally move in, and there is tons and tons of trash and junk and material, and there is biohazardous waste, and there's also violent and dangerous items nearby and different situations that could occur that nobody wants to deal with. So when you're talking about some of these you know, first responders that are being asked to go in and deal with these situations, you're basically asking, you know, someone to enter the lion's den and do their best to get out without getting scathed in any way. And that's exactly what's happening here. And so this story kind of just quickly touches on the fact that somebody goes in to clean this place up. They're not doing it in a very enforcing way. They're just going in and trying to, clean it up and reestablish, exactly what's happening there in a way that's, ethical and, positive. And then, trying to move these people somewhere a little safer or whatever they want to call it, or however they want to, use euphemisms to make the whole thing sound better in their opinion. But at the end of the day, basically you have people that are cleaning up disgusting things that could get you sick or definitely hurt you for the long term. They're having to use grabber sticks and all kinds of stuff because things are unsafe. And then once they finally clean up one person's mess, basically, one person's encampment and one person's tent and one person's belongings, they have to go and do it to the next. And this just kind of talks about all the different stuff happening here. And California is a huge problem. And this is saying 113,000 people of its homeless population are unsheltered. And I think California has about 160,000 counted homeless people in general, but that's just counted. And when we see these numbers and when we hear about these numbers, we need to understand that this is not a easily measured metric. You can't just go out and start counting heads over on the beach and be like, yeah, it's about 160K. It doesn't work that way. So the numbers we're getting are probably lower than what they actually are. A lot of people don't claim homelessness. A lot of people aren't out living on the streets. A lot of people aren't going to food banks. So the metrics that they're using to try to count this number are probably inaccurate. We probably see a lot more of this coming year due to the fact that people are still struggling financially. The eviction moratoriums are ending and people don't really see much relief in sight. So a lot of the homeless population is turning to these tent cities. San Francisco created safe sleeping villages during the pandemic and obviously, had all this, city municipality running for those villages. But of course, they're not going to last forever. But of course, at the same time, we all know they probably will, because once you create something like that, you can't just tear it away either. It's not like a Band-Aid that you can just rip off. And these things, are just a byproduct of failure of leadership and a terrible economy that was basically ruined due to a singular event over the course of the last year. And yes, those of us who follow what's going on in the world know that things are going to eventually crash at some point, no matter what would have happened last year. But what happened last year is a whole different scenario that kind of pushed things to a different level and a different edge than what we were even expecting. So you can see that when you talk about law enforcement having to clear large encampments, you have protests that are happening because of it. You have people arresting people. You have all kinds of stuff happening, and it's a dangerous situation, and it's not something that's easy to cure. And this is exactly what's happening. And this is just one article about the situation. Obviously, this is a terrible thing for anyone who's had to experience homelessness. And this isn't a chat or a discussion about, what is wrong or what is negative about the homeless population. It's not about that at all. It's just showing us that this indicator of society degrading, aka urban decay, does exist and is in fact getting worse and really doesn't have any solution in sight. And all we've seen that these cities are doing is pouring money on the fire. And when you do that, it doesn't help anything. It just kind of makes it last longer and makes it look nice for the time being, but it doesn't actually solve any problems. And we saw that with putting people in hotels. We saw that with allowing these villages or encampments or communities to exist and actually be provided with, city water and sewage and everything else that was related to that. And now we're just finding more and more reasons for people to decide that maybe that's just a better lifestyle for them anyway. So the urban decay, yes, of course, it has to do with the homeless populations. It has to do with the fact that people are no longer able to live in sanitary conditions, which is a huge indicator of urban decay. And one of the things that we can do is actually, preface this. I just want to preface this. Yes, I know exactly what the deal is with NPR. Okay, I totally get it. But this is just another metric to kind of utilize to kind of see where we are. Not that NPR is, the most honest reporting on the planet. But what I will say is that they at least give us some numbers to look at. The nation's homeless population grew last year for the fourth year in a row. On a single night in January 2020, there were more than 580,000 individuals who were homeless in the United States, and that's a 2% increase from the year before. So it's increasing, and even if you're just talking about 1 or 2%, well, 1% of 100,000 is 1,000. So we're talking 2% of 580,000 is almost 12,000 more people that are now homeless, okay? And so you're talking thousands of people being made homeless on an annual basis, and that's just that many more people who are now adding to the situation that's creating a lot of this urban decay. And like I said, we are not necessarily demonizing, anybody who's been put out into a financial situation that required them to find alternative means of living. That is not the point of this conversation. The whole idea here is to have a really good and wide-ranging understanding of just what is happening in the country and just what's happening in our urban environments, and understand that we need to prepare for this to eventually spill over into suburban environments. And from there, there's only one other place to go. And obviously, at some point, you're going to see these people want to stop dealing with things like getting these police cleanouts and all that stuff happening. And the easiest way to do that is to go out somewhere where there isn't really any police. Well, when that starts to happen, we know that that means the rural environments are going to be targeted by these communities to start setting up shop, because they're not going to be interacted with, at least in their opinion. And that's when we can see things starting to get a little bit more chaotic. So wanted to bring this to your attention. This is something that is going to keep happening. And because of the economy and because of what's happened last year, we're not going to expect to see a homeless population or the population of people who are put out financially, or those who are now relying on the government solely as a source of income, to just start to decline. It's only going to increase. And because of that increase, we're going to have more and more problems due to the situation. So I want to get back here in the chat real quick, and then we'll touch base back on some more indicators of urban decay and how it's spreading, and how we have to at least be prepared for taking care of ourselves in many, many ways. When I say that, I don't mean, just being able to have food in case something happens, or have water in case something happens. I mean, being able to prepare to be our own 911, being able to prepare to be our own community that relies on itself to take care of the problems at hand, and trying to assist people in a way that's charitable, that, helps the situation at hand without creating a chaotic mess of people migrating to your area because of what's being given out. So there's a huge balance that has to be found, and this is very difficult, which is why we should prepare for it now, before we start seeing it actually affect the areas that a lot of you in the chat probably live in. And like I said, if you are in an urban environment, you live in a city, and you have a lot of firsthand information about this urban decay scenario we're witnessing, and you want to let us know kind of what's going on in your area, please do so in the chat, so that we can talk about it more and get some real, firsthand eyewitness experience in the conversation, and have good ideas about exactly what's going on out there. I used to live in urban environments. I used to live in the East Bay area of California. I used to live in Sacramento, California. Before that, I grew up in Florida, in a relatively larger city. And it's not like I'm not used to the concept of what happens out there in the cities. But now I do live in a rural environment. So it is a different thing for me to sit here and see what's happening on the news, and see what's happening or being reported on, and then hearing it from other friends anecdotally, but to hear it from people directly in the chat, and people who are there right now seeing it themselves, gives us a better idea of what's really going on. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to touch base on the chat a little bit here. So Roberts Bushcraft says, it seems like big inner cities in California are allowing urban decay, so normal people will leave. CA, California, then moves the tent cities out, then the uber rich take over real estate. Sounds crazy, but. So that's an interesting concept, and I do want to touch base on it, because it has something to do with what's next in this conversation about urban decay. And I do appreciate every one of you being here. I do want to mention that I do really thank you all for coming to these live streams and supporting me and being part of the conversation. Like, it is really rewarding to be here and to talk to all of you, and to be part of this community is extremely beneficial. So I just want to say thank you really quick before I forget, because I just never stop talking. And since I'm drinking black coffee here in the middle of the night, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon either, okay? Oh, it's so good. Okay, so the next part of the conversation that actually brings me right into it from our last question. Sorry, I'm missing it now at this point because I got too carried away. But the whole idea was basically that it was all planned to, get everybody to move out and then let the uber rich move in. It was Roberts Bushcraft, okay? And what I want to talk about now is the other part of this urban decay scenario, which is, kind of along with the rest of the plan, right? So you create a problem and then you also create a solution. We all know that whole story. We all know how this works, right? So you have this urban decay, you allow for crime to spike and you allow for things to happen, including, defunding certain aspects of your city municipality that used to keep law and order in place, right? Well, now what's happening is that the crime is spiking and people are losing their minds. And we're seeing things like blatant shoplifting occur. We're seeing different companies have to close stores all over the country because they can no longer afford to operate in those areas where they're no longer being defended in the sense of, keeping their property safe and only being able to sell it rather than just straight lose it out the front door. And what we are seeing now is the solution being provided. And this is where I look at things and start to get a little bit more concerned, and something that I want you guys to be aware of. And let's see. Liberty Off-Road, does Mrs. Magic Prepper support your prepping? Yes, she does. Yes, she does. And I will say that, I do appreciate that she supports it because it is difficult if you don't have everybody on board. So that is important. Diabetic Prepper, have you got that coffee you were talking about for sale yet? I'm not selling coffee. That's not the deal here. But I'll talk about some coffee here a little bit later just because now I can. But what I want to talk about is Wild Nesting Mag is a mutual assistance group. So, thank you guys for hanging with me through that. I just saw some of these chats and I wanted to touch base, okay? So we are going to talk about the solution that's being offered now. And this is where it gets really fun. This is where I have a great time, I always enjoy these kinds of things that you can see coming from a mile away, and yet they just still do them anyway. So let's see here. Let's pull this one up for you guys. Another, maybe not trustworthy news source, but it is just more information, right? Here we go. Because that's everything nowadays. What is trustworthy? Anyway, okay, so Baltimore police requesting 100 federal officers to assist in fighting violent crime. Isn't that interesting? So you basically create situations where you don't want the police that are already in your city, and you create a scenario where you're trying to find out better ways to police the population. And then crime spikes, and then homicides start to go through the roof, and then there's a lot of other issues that start to happen within your city. And then things start to get really bad, and you start to get desperate, and the first thing you think of is, well, what if we call the federal government and ask them for assistance? So suddenly we are in a situation where the federal government is going to be able to supply officers to cities like Baltimore to help in the fight of the crime spike. And it's a solution that was created for a problem that was also created. And this is where we talk about things like the federal police state being enacted. We all know that at some point in time, the federal government wants to overreach and wants to put more law enforcement in and out and around other places where they can have a longer reach and then eventually utilize it in a way that might not be popular. But the best thing we can hope for and the best thing we can do is hope to maintain our local and our state government levels for policing ourselves in our communities, because that's what we know works as of right now. That's where you have the most control as an individual to vote in your own local elections, to vote in your state elections, to have actual input as to what happens in your local area, in your municipality, and try to basically, mold things in a way that works best for your area, because every area is different and not every area works the same. But this is where the federal government wants to step in and help out. They're here to help, right? We always hear that all the time. And now we're in a situation where the problems that have been created by those who are in control are now having a solution offered that was probably already ideal in many ways, at least in their opinion. So you're going to have involvement of federal officers. The federal government has yet to agree to the plan, but it is believed that up to 100 officers, many from the AFT, sorry, and the U.S. Marshal's Office would be sent to assist Baltimore police. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that we are in a situation where the federal government's getting involved in things that they don't necessarily need to be. But oh well, here we are again, okay? And we did see things like this happen over the last year during all the unrest and everything else. But now we're talking about just basic day-to-day crime in a major municipality. And this is exactly the outcome that was probably planned ahead of time in order to involve the federal police forces like the ATF and the U.S. Marshals in your local and state, governing bodies. And now we're in a situation where it's happening here, and it means it's going to easily happen anywhere else that requests said assistance. And we already know that the U.S. Capitol Police are opening additional offices in other states. So with that being said, we know that this federal police situation is going to continually grow and continually become more and more involved in our just regular old daily lives as Americans. And when it comes to your local and state level, this is not what you want, because this is going to turn into a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more difficulty when it comes to navigating the laws of the land, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of people that technically don't have jurisdiction but are going to enforce it whether or not you like it. So this is something that I saw, and I thought this is more of the urban decay. Allow the cities and the municipalities to spiral into chaos, right? And then create a solution to fix the chaos, so that way everyone feels better about it. Once you get people desperate enough, they're going to ask for the assistance that you're offering, whether or not it's the poison pill. And that's exactly what these kinds of things are. Once you get federal police involved with things like policing the average citizen in cities like Baltimore, they're not going to just leave. It's going to maintain and continue on for a long period of time. So let's see here. DIY Dad, the coffee goes away, all bets are off. Good thing I have a year's supply in my basement. That is solid. You can't go wrong with that. I will admit that you need coffee for SHTF. You got to have a lot stored away. And there will be marauders out there roaming the wasteland, hunting down coffee and trying to smell those aroma-filled beans from miles away, and they will come for your coffee. But they're also marauders, so they'll definitely be using equal. Anyway, we'll have to keep moving forward from there, because like I said, we got to have a good time sometimes, okay? I want to get back in the chat, just kind of touch base with everybody. Eric, Magic Pepper reminds me of the lead character of the Going Home series. I don't even know what that is, so I'll have to check it out, I guess. And if I watch it and I'm completely offended, I'll probably just laugh. So I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you so much. Let's see here. All right, I want to touch base with a couple more of these. Okay. Jason Kincaid says, all monetary fiat currencies must have a police force to enforce their currency's validity. New money equals new police and force. So what he's talking about most likely is things like FedCoin, right? The federal cryptocurrency they want to release. And obviously there's a lot of speculation around that. There's a lot of information out there surrounding the idea of the US dollar falling to the wayside. And I can see what his point is in that sense, when you're talking about having to basically have the federal government involved with policing to make sure that the new currency takes foot. Sure, we can see that and consider it a possibility down the road here. Let's see here. Trying to read some more of the chat. Joan Gillen solved the microphone problem. I just got to be closer, and that's okay. I don't mind being closer. I can be a little bit closer. I like to relax, you know what I mean? But it's okay. We'll be fine. And I do want to say that this urban decay scenario is going to open the door for a lot of other initiatives in the future as well. And when I say that, what I mean is that the spike in crime is already being targeted in certain ways when you look at states like New York, and you have Governor Cuomo, who negligently allowed a lot of people to succumb to what happened last year, is also now blaming a lot of things on something that's not, actually the problem. So he's at it again, and I'm trying to be careful about how I say everything, because I'm still trying to get, back into the partner program here, and we'll see if that actually works or not. Who knows? But I will say that, yeah, his whole idea is that you have to target the Second Amendment and you have to target gun control because of the crime spike. That crime itself has nothing to do with any of the decisions or any of the leadership failures at that level in the state of New York. It has everything to do with the fact that the Second Amendment exists and that people have access to firearms. So that is the problem, according to Governor Cuomo. And this whole urban decay scenario opens that door up too. Like I said, poison pill solutions. So we're saying, okay, what do I do if, all this stuff is falling apart, urban decay, everywhere I look, things are scary and dangerous? Whoa, hold on, I'll help you, don't worry. Here's what we do. We get rid of that scary thing that's a problem, right? And once that's not a problem anymore, all this will go away. And then a lot of people will eat that up and buy it because it sounds good and it's wrapped in silver lining with a red ribbon, and they're going to love it until they open it on Christmas and inside is communism. So, but let's see here. Mighty Warrior says it's going to get worse because nobody cares. Everyone's stuck in their own personal greed. There's a level of truth to that. The reason behind that is that everybody has their own struggles and everybody has their own priorities, because there's only so much the average person can focus on and do in their daily life while also trying to maintain their livelihood and their quality of life. So yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it is difficult because everybody has their own focus and their own priorities, and not everybody can be on board with every single situation that needs attention. So it's an understandable situation, but it is also unfortunate. Okay, let's see here. I would like to touch base with some more of the chat. South Bend Shovel Slayer, show us a magic trick for once. Not live. No. That's the worst way to do magic. Don't you watch Chris Angel? It has to be pre-recorded. So you'll have to give me that benefit, okay? Anyway, moving from there. Steve F. says, when we're all starting to fight over instant coffee, you know it's gotten bad. You know what? That might happen sooner than you might think. And honestly, coffee will be one of the things that a lot of people are going to have a rough time with in the first few days, even of a big-time SHTF scenario, especially those who rely on quick service coffee like Starbucks and, you know, City Brew and all the other coffee joints out there, because that's what they get every day. So they don't actually stock coffee in their house, or they don't like coffee at home because it's not a, you know, half froth almond milk latte with sprinkles or whatever people order. Sprinkles, I don't know. But anyway, what I'm saying is that a lot of those people will be put out immediately from their caffeine addiction. And then people like myself will still have lots of caffeine for a long period of time. But when it runs out, which it might eventually, things could get very bad. So wean yourself slowly if that's what you have to do. And instant coffee is great for that because it stores forever. It's easy to store. It makes a lot of coffee. It's easy to make. You don't have to have anything other than hot water. And you can definitely downgrade the dosage as need be and wean yourself off of it if you ever need to in those scenarios. But the best thing to do is stock up on coffee like a crazy person and not have to worry about running out, okay? Like Steve F. said earlier, I believe, that he had like a year's supply or whoever that was, but those are the right people. Yardbirds. I'm Lance Burton's long-lost son. Lance Burton. I feel like I should know that name. We'll see if it comes up again later. And by the way, the Yardbirds is an excellent band. I don't know if a lot of people know who they are. But if you do know who they are, hashtag Yardbirds right now while I drink some coffee. Okay, so urban decay, more problems, things that we need to actually do here, okay? Pony Girl, MP, should that be in bean form? Pony Girl, I would say that beans would probably be easier to store long term, I guess, but you could get more density out of grounds. And then at the same time, honestly, like what I like to try to get for actual storage purposes is the instant coffee for all the said reasons before. It takes the least amount of energy to actually brew, and it lasts forever. So that's just what I roll with, to be honest with you, okay? So Jamie Bell, you know what's up. All right, so I just wanted to touch base on that. Let's get back to urban decay, and let's talk about another thing that we can talk about regarding that, which is the crime spike. And is there a crime spike? Well, it depends on how you want to look at it and what perspective you're coming from. If you're coming from the perspective of, well, it's not as bad as the early 90s or late 80s, then okay, sure, there's not really a crime spike. If you're talking about the last 10 years, then things are starting to look kind of bad. And that's exactly what we should be looking at, because referring things to 40 or 30 years ago doesn't really help us right now. And you can do that with anything in life if you want. Oh, well, you know, this whole situation wasn't as bad as being in medieval times. Oh, well, yeah, I guess you're right. So let's just pretend nothing's wrong. Not how things are supposed to work, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about the crime spike. And let's talk about it from the perspective of a different country. Good old UK, because they always have great things to say about America, right? All I'm saying is I get lots of different sources. I try to do my due diligence and find other places to find information, okay? So New York has become the first state in the United States to declare an emergency to tackle increasing levels of gun violence, directing extra funds for programs, I just imagine that's how they say it, aimed at preventing shootings. Okay, so obviously they're admitting crime's going up, even though the reason for it is probably asinine, and the idea that they're trying to put behind it is clearly political, but they have to admit that the problem is there, and so this is their way of doing it. There's a problem, we're going to admit it, but it's the problem is this other thing that we don't like, and you don't like either, so let's just get rid of it, right? That's how they like to do things, but they have to admit the problem one way or the other, and this is how they do it. So what's going on? Well, you can see this graph here, and this is violent crime offenses per 100,000 people from 1986 to 2020. Yes, in the early 90s, violent crime had hit historic highs and had been higher than ever before and all these things. And yes, we already know that, and we did a lot of stuff, and a lot of things happened and whatever you want to talk about. But they're going back up slowly here compared to where we were back in 2014. So we're basically on our way back up another hill, and we got to at least anticipate what could happen here in the future. But the real thing to really look at here isn't the violent crime offenses, it's actual murders in the United States, which are drastically up from last year alone. And that is something that we at least have to understand, that is, when you take crime and you stick it into a category, it's easy to minimize its effect. But when you look at it on an individual level, and you look at people actually, losing their life to crime over the last year, it's up 25%, which is huge. And honestly, we all can agree that the majority of that's from the urban areas. So that being said, this is something that we have to be concerned about. Those of you who are prepping and trying to be as best prepared as you can in an urban environment, you guys should be concerned about this spike, because it is showing that, yes, violent crime is not like through the roof compared to previous years, but since 2014, it's up. But right now, what we're seeing is that people actually losing their lives to violent crime is way up, 25% up. And that is something that's a huge indicator of more urban decay, because people are losing the value of human life. And yes, they've already lost it in many ways. But what we're saying is that people are now willing to go that far to commit the crimes that they're trying to commit because of whatever reasons they have for being in that position. Often it's desperation. Often it is a crime of opportunity that leads to something worse due to things that were unforeseen, aka somebody trying to fight back, or somebody, walking up on a situation they weren't supposed to see, or whatever it might have been. And now we're seeing some different numbers when we look at it on an individual crime basis rather than just a whole statistic, okay? And obviously Chicago is way up, but Chicago, I know there's some people from Chicago in here. I know there's some good people from Chicago, and I've met a lot of great people from Chicago. But that city is definitely becoming the poster child for what to do wrong with managing a large municipality. And it is falling to pieces every single day. More and more terrible things are happening there, and it's just not getting better. And if you're in Chicago, I mean, you really do have to ask yourself why you're still there. Even if it's for financial reasons, even if you have an amazing job that pays so well, is that worth the risk of being in that environment at this point? Because this is not going to get better soon. In fact, it's probably not going to get better ever, because I honestly believe that cities like Chicago have already crossed a precipice where they can't return to what it was before. And things have already created their own environment and their own market of crime that's not going to just go away easily from any interaction from law enforcement or anybody who has the power to do anything. It's really just going to start being its own, built-in economy that has its own rules and its own laws, and it's no longer going to operate under the rule of law that we're used to. And it's going to just continue on in that way. And that's honestly how I feel, just based on observing what's been happening over there, okay? So just wanted to bring that up because things get a little crazy sometimes in places like Chicago. But yes, violent crimes, we see that, well, they're way down from this one time, but okay, they're getting worse again. And I think if you look at these reports, you have to then go back to what I said earlier, which is talking to people here in the chat, talking to people who actually know what's going on and see it on a daily basis. Their quality of life is being affected directly by this decay. And it's not just, oh, well, this report says the crime isn't actually that bad, so it's probably not that bad. But what people are telling me from these areas and from these cities is that it's worse than they've ever seen, and that they can't get away from it no matter what they do. And no matter what part of town you go to, there is some kind of decay that they're seeing every single day. And it is something that, I feel should be mentioned, because a lot of people are just reading reports, and when they say a statistic like, well, this one graph says it's actually not that bad as what it could have been, makes everyone feel like, okay, well, now nothing's really going on, so nothing to see here. But what people are telling me from the ground is just that it's getting worse, and that we need to prepare for that to get worse, because people are leaving the cities, and they are leaving, especially places like Chicago. I've read reports recently of people living there their entire lives, packing up and leaving with no plan. They don't have money. They don't have a place. They're literally packing their car and just going because they don't want to put their children at risk. They don't want to put their livelihood at risk, and they're afraid of being there any longer. And so displacement and basically urban refugees are something that we should expect here in the future. And it's going to start happening. And like we say a lot in this community, SHTF is not an immediate thing. It doesn't happen in the course of 3 hours unless something drastic happens just out of nowhere, like an asteroid strike. But the likelihood of that is extremely low compared to the likelihood of the slow boil scenario where things just slowly devolve into chaos over time to the point where a lot of us won't even see it happening until one day you wake up and go, oh, crap. I remember electricity. That was nice. Well, that's not a thing anymore. And that's exactly what we should expect. So these people slowly moving away from Chicago and slowly leaving without plans and just packing things up and getting out of there are probably going to be displaced and possibly homeless as well when they find out they can't just get another place wherever they end up. And that just implicates and also exponentially grows the problem we're talking about in the sense of the decay. But eventually the word urban will leave the word decay, and it will just be suburban decay. And then when that occurs and that whole situation falls apart, then it turns into what? Is it rural decay, or is it just nationwide decay at that point? Because that's really the last bastion of where these things stop. And when that stops, do we even have what we had as a country before? That's something you have to ask yourself now and prepare for ahead of time, because these are the things that we're seeing happening, okay? And the BBC, I guess they have this little thing called reality check. I don't even know what that's about, but I don't even want to know because we all know what their deal is. But I just wanted to kind of touch base on that information and give you guys something to think about, because these are the different urban decay things that we're seeing happening. And all these little indicators that I just showed you guys and talked about with you are why we should be preparing for it and why we should be concerned about it. Because it's not just one place. It's not just Venice Beach, California, okay? It's not just the middle of New York City. It is every major municipality seeing a rise in this behavior and a rise in this homelessness and a rise in this crime, to the point where eventually it's going to make its way somewhere that you never thought it might have. And that is something I prepare for, because one thing that we shouldn't do as a community, and one thing that if you're trying to be as prepared as you can, you should never do, is pigeonhole yourself into an ideology or a perspective that it will never happen where you are and never happen to you, because that's something that we all talk about when it comes to self-defense, right? Well, why do you need a way to defend yourself? You know, nothing's going to happen. Oh, well, it always happens to you, or doesn't happen to you until it does, right? That's what we say. And then when it comes to preparedness, we like to say things like, well, it'll never happen here. Why? Because we just say so, or because we have too much faith in what's around us or our community or whatever it might be. That's fine, and I hope it never happens here, and I hope it never happens there. But we should at least prepare for it to be able to, because by saying it won't ever gives you an unreasonable amount of confidence in something that you can't actually predict. So I just want to bring that to your attention, because it is something that we are plagued with, especially those of us who live in rural environments. It's very easy to just be like, yeah, wide open skies, tons of land, can't see anybody for miles, I'm good to go. And then one day you're not. And it's because you didn't prepare properly because you were too comfortable in your situation, which is the exact same thing that happens to people in urban environments. They're too comfortable in their situation, so they don't try to leave. And then one day they realize they're trapped and they can't leave. And that happens to people in places like San Francisco all the time, where having a vehicle doesn't make sense. You can't afford it anyway, so you get rid of it. And then one day you wake up and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and all you want to do is leave, but you don't even have a car anymore to be able to do so. And this is something that happens all the time in San Francisco. And I have friends that have literally lived that life before, and it took them a long, long time to finally get up and leave, not because they didn't want to, because they literally couldn't afford to. And that is an issue that we have to, keep in mind, okay? So let's see. I want to talk to the chat, and let's see. T-Rex, we as preppers are outnumbered by non-preppers, so aren't we screwed? Well, the idea is to remain as, I guess, legitimate as possible for as long as possible. And what that means is that having a quality of life that you can sustain on your own with your family, and trying to stay away and avoid the negative situations for as long as you possibly can. And yes, we are outnumbered, and yes, the unprepared definitely outweigh the prepared. But in that scenario, it's also our job to try to get more people prepared. So that way that whole situation is that much less of a risk. Now, I know that is wishful thinking, and I know that is something that we can't just expect to have happen eventually, but it would be nice to get as many more people prepared as possible. So when these scenarios happen, there's less of a risk to those of us who already did our due diligence. So that's just one of the things that, I would say we should consider. And it looks like a lot of people are talking in the chat about possibility of EMP and saying that an EMP is definitely a big, top 10 situation that could happen. And I agree. It's definitely something we should be concerned about and prepare for. There's many ways to approach that. Do you want to put everything in a Faraday cage and protect all your electronics? Or do you want to prepare in a way that allows you to rely on things that don't require things like electricity? So these are different strategies you have to kind of figure out on your own and find a good balance of maybe both to give yourself quality of life now and the ability to maintain later, even if something like that happens. So definitely a possibility. Anytime some kind of weaponry exists that can create something like an EMP, we should understand that is now a possibility. Now, when you look at things like nuclear, right? Well, that hasn't happened for what, 70 years now almost? Well, 65 years. Okay, well, that doesn't mean it can't happen again, and it doesn't mean it won't happen eventually. But what we can say is that it's still a possibility. So the same reason you would prepare for something like, a nuclear threat is the same reason you would prepare for an EMP, because it exists, which means it's possible. Okay, and let's see here. Now, I know I saw something interesting earlier, and let's see. Only one wants to know if I play Magic the Gathering. That's what he said, okay, basically. The answer is yeah, I do. So get over it. All right, anyway. Been too long, too many years. Sorry, guys, but I'll tell you the truth if you ask me, all right? Now, I want to say, yes, this has been a great chat. And yes, I am still drinking coffee. Someone asked earlier, hey, are you at the situation now where you're selling the coffee? Or I'm not selling coffee, but I did make an affiliation with Invader Coffee. And the reason I went to work with Invader was because I got sick of the crap coming from Black Rifle Coffee Company, constantly belittling their customer base and constantly putting their foot in their own mouth and causing problems when they have a responsibility, especially operating on platforms like this one, when they have such a large following, to encourage the type of ideologies that promote the Second Amendment and to encourage people to feel, valued in their own opinion and not have to, defend their ideas from somebody who's super rich now that decides they had their own thought process. I just don't agree with that, and I'm just tired of it. And yes, they've done this before many times. I've been ripped apart before for having a BRCC coffee cup in a video before. And, these are things that, we try to support good companies and we try to support veteran-owned businesses and American businesses, and that's what we try to do. And, of course, that's going to be a good thing most of the time. But when they continually cause problems in the sense of making their, not only their customer base, but their audience, because they are like a media company almost as much as they are a coffee company. Well, if you're going to go ahead and, degrade the people who support you and put down the people who have put their money to building you that business and creating a situation where you're so wealthy that you feel you can belittle the people who got you where you are now, then that's a problem for me. And I'm not going to support it just because you're veteran owned or just because it's an American company when you come out and start talking in that way or acting in that manner. So I just wanted to mention that I am affiliated with Invader Coffee now. I got links in my descriptions and you can get coffee from them. They're a veteran owned American business that makes good coffee. And that's what I'm drinking right now. And I got to say, it's pretty good stuff, and coffee, especially for preppers, are we going to spend tons and tons of money on coffee? No. But at times, do I spend money on a nicer cup of coffee and then in hopes to support an American business that's, veteran owned and operated? I do. And that's something that I was trying to do when it came to Black Rifle Coffee. And then they just kept making me feel bad about it. So let's just not feel bad anymore. And, if you want Invader Coffee, like I said, I got links. If you have other companies that you guys support, let me know in the chat, because I'm open to other stuff too. And I love coffee. And I figured, I got ticked off. I saw the last little conundrum that was created, the fiasco by Black Rifle. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to go find another company similar to them that I like better, that doesn't do this kind of crap. And I'm going to ask them if they want to work with me, because I just feel like that's the best thing I can do to tell them to screw off. And that's what I did. So just wanted to mention that. And hopefully that's, something you guys can understand, because yeah, I got demonetized and I just looked for some other avenues to kind of see what else would be out there, for the reasons that, operating this channel isn't necessarily free all the time. And I'm not trying to, sound greedy or anything like that. But I mean, we also what happened with ammo last year, and dang, I'm still trying to make some videos, guys. And yes, there are some videos like that coming in the future that will still be on YouTube, not just on Patreon. So I do hope you guys understand that, but I am just really trying to study the guidelines so I can walk that tightrope just right, so you guys can still get the good stuff the best I can deliver it, okay? So I'm working on it, I promise. But that's just something I went on my rant because I was like, it just made me upset, the whole thing, man. Just so annoying to me that you have people that grow a business and get so big and have so much support and have this idea behind it that's super awesome, and then just continually make people feel bad that support it and make people look bad that support it, to the point where, like, I had trolls coming at me because of one time I had a coffee cup of theirs in a video. That's when you know you screwed up, at least in my opinion, okay? All right, let's see here. Prepper Nerd, you ever want to email me? Anyone needs to email me. I can't guarantee an easy response. I get a crap load of emails, but I'm more than happy to try my best. magicprepper@gmail.com. If you go to magicprepper.com, there is a contact form there where you can send me an email directly through that. All I'm trying to do is get back to you guys when I can, and it is very difficult. I do have a family and I do have a lot going on where it's just hard to respond to every single message I get, but I do try to, and eventually I go back and try to get back to the ones that I missed or maybe fell down in the inbox somewhere. And don't be afraid to hit me up more than once, because sometimes, I miss it and I don't see it again, and I don't want you to be offended. I want you to just message me again, because I will try my best to get back to you. It is just difficult. I don't have a marketing team. I don't have a videographer. Every video I make, I video myself. I record myself. It's just me. It's just a camera. It's just me on the editing software. It's just me making the thumbnails. I do the whole thing. So it is more work than you would actually expect, and I say that, in a way that is not trying to sound like this is super hard or anything like that, because it is definitely not manual labor. But I will say that it's time consuming. Okay. So let's see here. Billy Bird Outdoors. Everybody wants to be Magic Prepper's pen pal. You know what? I think letters are a good way to go too. So I will be getting a P.O. box here soon that I'm going to open up just specifically for interacting with the people here in the community, as well as trying to, get some things done like on Patreon at certain patron levels. Like I send you out like a little thank you package and stuff like that. So, soon I'll have a P.O. box. That way my return address isn't going to be something that is too personal, especially after my big candy Halloween video, everybody likes to call it anyway. Oh, man, I love coffee. Why am I still drinking coffee at 9:30 at night? Because that's how we do things, okay? How are you going to stay awake all night long in an SHTF scenario, guarding your perimeter without coffee? That's what you really have to ask yourself. It's not about night vision. It's not about illumination. It's not about hydration. It's about coffee and only coffee. Keep that in mind. Oh, and Pepto-Bismol, because we all know what too much coffee will do. All right, so let's see here. Texas Poon Tappa, nah. So they are not monetized, so you can't super chat me now enough money to do that for you anymore. Sorry. So trust me, I don't think they would allow you to tip that much, because it would be quite a bit. In order to lose more than half of the subscribers here, it costs a lot. I don't want to do that otherwise. Okay, so Night of the Living Preppa, MP, are you a ham operator? I am not yet a ham operator. I am looking into getting courses, and I also do have a ham radio, and I have it set up, and I have been learning how it operates and learning how to use it. But obviously I can only listen right now because I don't have a license, so I cannot broadcast, but I do have a setup. It is amateur. It is, primitive, I guess, in many ways, but it is nice. And I bought a used ICOM, which is a nice little transceiver, and it's got a decent power supply and a little antenna and all this stuff. It's not a pro setup or anything like by that means. But what I do suggest to everybody who's interested in comms and learning about ham radio is to get a setup and to build a small setup. You don't have to get your license to do that first, and get acquainted with the equipment and start learning how it works, so that one day, if you ever need to send out a mayday of some kind, you're not trying to figure out what buttons do what, or how this whole thing even works, and like what frequency is where, you can start learning your frequencies for your locality. You can start learning, how the system works and how everything operates. And then you can start working on your license as well, which will be easier to learn because you're acquainted with the equipment that it's referring to. So that's just that's my suggestion, because that's what I'm doing. And, maybe there's better ways, but a lot of things I have to do on my own and learn the hard way, because I generally just do things that way, I guess. And it's not always the best way, but I do learn a lot through failure. And I think that's also important, and something that a lot of people in the preparedness community need to keep in mind. Your first garden might just suck, and you might not get any food, and all your plants will die. And that's fine, because you probably learned that you overwatered, or you learned that you watered during the wrong part of the day, or you learned that you overplanted, or whatever it might be. And it gives you a little bit more insight to how to be successful the next time around. And I think the same way about things like ham radio. So I am, working on that. And it is something that I do want to get better information on. And I think that's so, like, what I have at least, put together on my own through a little bit of research. And I bought my ICOM transceiver right off of eBay, and it was used. I connected with the guy who was selling it, talked to him a little bit first, asked about, its quality and its, if it's in good condition and everything else like that. And we had a good conversation, and he even gave me his ham tag, as well as, his number, so that if there's any problems I have or run into, I can give him a call. So, that's something that I could say you can do. It's easy to get used equipment to save a lot of money. And honestly, I bought I think it's like a $400 transceiver, and I got it for like $150 because it was used and out of some guy's truck. So, hey, dual band, and it gets me started. And I'm pretty, and ICOM is a solid brand from what I understand. ICOM, Kenwood, and I think Yaesu is the other one. So that's all I heard anyway. But yes, let's see. I saw another great question here in the chat, one that needs to be addressed because it comes in a lot. Let's see. Where'd it go? Well, I do see that somebody is asking about like censorship. Gosh, I keep missing the question. Either way, what they're saying is basically, what's my thoughts on the censorship happening in the world right now? What's the situation? And obviously nothing is ideal in that sense. And if I had it my way, I like the idea of completely free speech. I don't like the idea of censoring anybody. And I think people can say terrible, horrible things and have terrible, horrible ideologies that none of us would agree with. But I think that as a community and as people and as free thinkers, we can all decide not to involve ourselves with those people at that time. And in fact, it allows us to actually know how people and who people really are. So to me, squelching all this speech and censorship and everything else creates a more dangerous situation where nobody's willing to actually speak their mind. And then, eventually you start working with people you don't even know. And you don't even know if you agree with or line up with or have the same thoughts or disagreements. And I just feel that, pure free speech is part of what this country is built on. And it's important to be able to get true information. And because that doesn't necessarily exist any longer, can anything really be true? I don't know. That's something that you guys can discuss, okay? Let's see here. Somebody asked, Bishop Tactical, do you dye your hair or what? I like this one. It always happens. I don't dye my hair. And I know a lot of people think I do. I get a lot of comments about it. Why do you dye your hair? Hey, skunk prepper this and prepper Le Pew. And what's another good one I get? Why are you trying to look so punk rock? And hey, send your haircut back to the 90s. All those things. I get it a lot. It's hilarious to me. No, I don't dye my hair. It literally just grows that way. I have vitiligo, which means I lose pigment in my skin, which you can't really tell because I'm very pale. But in my hair, which is basically black, it's very obvious, and it's all right there in the front. So, no, don't dye my hair. Thank you for asking so I could address it. And I just think it's funny because it will never not be a thing, apparently. Let's see. Packet FPV says, I believe in letting anyone say anything. I don't have to like it, but I have to defend their right to say it. That's part of the rights I swore to defend. And that's exactly my thought process there. Look, I don't have to like you or what you say. That's just part of being a person. I don't have to like anybody, but I can like a lot of people. And by hearing what they really think and hearing the truth, it allows you to really build those bonds that you might not be able to otherwise do. And it also lets you weed out the people that you don't want to associate with. And unfortunately, now we're getting to a scenario where, you can't even, know if what people are saying is what they want to say. And I'm pretty sure generally it's not. Doomsayer says Tulsi Gabbard's hairdo. I've gotten that one too. Tulsi Gabbard's little brother, which I think she's older than me. I don't know. And then I also have male Rogue from the X-Men. All the good stuff, man. I love it. Let's see here. So, all right. Kanzi, my skin is thick. You know that. You've been around. Kanzi's been around forever. And really great information in the comments, really great input. And you'll see Kanzi all over the preparedness community, generally putting timestamps on your video, telling people where to go to get the right information directly, and just kind of giving people other ideas about some of the things spoken about in videos. So I do appreciate you, Kanzi. You've done a lot over the years, and you're always supportive. So thank you for that. Let's see here. Patriot Games, which is just a great movie. Back before things just weren't great. How long before Biden is removed and a Kamala takes over? That's an interesting way to say it, I guess. You know what? Who knows? I have no idea. And who knows if that's even what's going to happen? We really don't know. This is it's just something that we have to watch. And it's unfortunate because it's hard to watch. And you know what? In general, the government in general is hard to watch. I don't like any of it anymore. I don't. And I don't trust anybody because it doesn't matter who it is anymore. There's something else going on that's way worse. So it is what it is, man. Here we are. Let's see here. Kanzi, when the SHTF hits, I made a joke to my wife. She's going to get her head shaved so no one messes with her. Honestly, probably a good idea, and that's something my wife has even said as well. She will shave her head because it's just easier to get around and deal with things when people aren't seeing you from a mile away as being a woman, possibly. And yeah, that's an unfortunate side effect of society and culture and everything else, and you can talk about it for a million years as to why things shouldn't or should be that way or whatever you want to say. But at the end of the day, when it comes to SHTF and survival, all your, political ideologies and all your thought process and all your righteousness and all that kind of stuff goes right out the window, and you have to just go with what makes the most sense for practicality and survival. And in that scenario, my wife has decided that shaving her head probably is the way to go. And it's hard for me to argue with. And honestly, my wife's not the kind of person who's just going to agree with everything when it comes to all that, practicality and ideology related to that kind of stuff. But she is a reasonably smart person, and she's not going to just not shave her head just because, of this or that. I guess I'm trying to say that the best way I can without sounding like a douche. Anyway, let's see. I have tons of family close to Magic Prepper. I'm almost curious if we're related. That'd be interesting, Black Bart, because I don't even know my relatives. That's how you get pure OPSEC. Just saying. Anyway, do want to go ahead and just touch base a little bit more here in the chat. And I do want to tell you guys, okay, so with Marauder Monday, I do have next week's coming up. I am still working on getting another guest on the show. I'm just waiting on them to confirm whether or not they can be there at that day and time. So just be aware that, yes, there's going to be guest speakers on this. There's going to be some great people coming over here from other channels, awesome content creators. There's so much good content when it comes to preparedness out there, and everyone has their own flavor, okay? And some people hate one flavor and love the other, okay? Not everybody likes Dr. Pepper, and they're probably not good people. But if they don't like Dr. Pepper, it's fine, because somebody over there is Coca-Cola, or somebody over there is Faygo, or somebody over there is Mountain Dew, which might be me. But what I'm trying to say is that there's so many good people out there that I'm trying my best to get as many of them over here as possible. And I just think it's a great way to interact. I think it's cool to have more voices on the channel. And I don't want to turn it into a giant house party situation where you have 12 people trying to talk over each other, but a one-on-one conversation with another preparedness community member who has good insight and the ability to give us all good information, and at the same time, maintain a level of, level-headedness when it comes to maybe debate, possibly, which might occur at some point. That is what I'm trying to do. And let's see, Irish Rebel, will you do more prepper vehicle vids? I want to see how your build-out finishes. Maybe down the road, I'll do an update once I can get some more equipment and stuff. I got some really good feedback on that bug-out vehicle video. What's awesome about making videos on YouTube, and I don't care who you are, you can do it. I definitely think everybody should try to do a YouTube channel, because the worst thing that can happen is that you get some more ideas from the comment section. You get some more ideas from the community. And every video I make, especially when it comes to gear and equipment, somebody has an opinion on. And those opinions are either positive or negative. And the negative ones are often the most educational, because it's someone with experience with the same gear, the same equipment, telling you a different way that they approached the problem and a different solution that they arrived at that you might not have thought of. And I've gotten so many good ideas from the comment section that a lot of my preps have actually kind of morphed towards what some of you have told me about. So when it comes to like my bug out bags, when it comes to the bug out vehicle, so much good input has led me to other things. Like bug out vehicle, I have all this extra equipment and gear for like breakdowns and stuff like that. And then somebody was like, hey man, like you don't even have extra fuses. And I was like, holy crap, like I don't. Why do I not have I have extra spark plugs, but not fuses? That's ridiculous. So I went to the store, I immediately got more fuses. And now I do have fuses, which would have been stupid not to. But it's hard to do everything right the first time around. And when you're taking on big projects that require tons and tons of, thought and equipment and small pieces to make the puzzle one complete piece, you sometimes forget things, or you sometimes don't think about one of the most obvious things. So having people give you that feedback can actually give you a lot of good information. And that's what has really helped me be that much more prepared. And even on other channels, I've commented on videos on some of the other larger preparedness channels out there, which you all know who they are. And people have gotten back on me on those comments, just saying other information about the things that I was trying to input. So really good way to communicate, really good way to network. And I always am open-minded to feedback and criticism and everything else, because there's always a little bit of truth to everything, right? And I try my best to not take it personally. It's not. I don't take it personally. Am I more prepared than the average person? Yeah. Am I the most prepared person? No. Am I an expert in preparedness? I don't know if that's something I could say, because honestly, there's a lot of people who have a lot more expertise than I do. But one thing I feel like I'm not bad at is delivering the information in a way that's digestible. So I go with what I'm good at, and some people go with what they're good at. And the guys who create, Faraday bags, and the guys who create solar generators, and the ladies that do the pressure canning and the awesome food preservation stuff like Prepper Potpourri, and all those people, have this expertise that I might not have. And so I listen to them. I don't just write it off because I have a different way. And that is exactly how everybody else should approach it, in all honesty. We're not experts on anything, because there's always somebody else who might know a little bit more. And that's kind of how I look at, running this channel. And it's actually really helped me do a lot more in the sense of being prepared and, just growing as a person. Taking criticism and receiving feedback and failing at attempts to be successful is a great teacher. And it's something that I think a lot of us need a lot more of. Okay. So let's see here. Bill Morrow says, not Coke. They are anti-2A. Then not. Then we can't do Coke. We can't drink Coke. This is probably why I got demonetized. I can't talk. Anyway, let's see. Now I can't even think. But I do want to say, guys, I am trying to kind of keep these live streams to about an hour. We're at an hour and 12 minutes right now. So I think I'm going to start wrapping it up. Please leave it in the comments. Anything else you want me to address on? I'll stick around here for another 5 minutes or so, and we'll just talk a little bit more. But I do appreciate you guys so much. I really do. Thank you guys so much. I am working on more and more content. I'm always trying to put out more information. I have a video coming out tomorrow night just about some more information that's out there regarding shortages, and just giving you guys a heads up on, ways to better prepare yourself. And some of this stuff is just dealing with daily life and actual, regular human necessities. But at the same time, preppers are regular people too. And we also still have to get what we need in order to operate in modern society as of right now. And yes, we have the ability to operate after it, but during it's also important. So I am trying to get some more information to you guys tomorrow about that. So make sure you come back and check in. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I pretty much post a similar schedule every week. Basically Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 7:30 at night. That's generally how the videos come out. Sometimes there's some, a movement there. Sometimes I get some information I just want to put out quickly and I don't wait around for a schedule. And sometimes I get behind and maybe I can't even stay on schedule. So, but generally that's what I try to stick to. So if you're worried about checking in, and I'm sure you have probably at least been unsubscribed, or your notification bell has been turned off, or maybe I'm not in your feed when I should be, or all those things that just happen sometimes. Now you know like when you can check if you haven't seen anything for a while. But pretty much that's what I always do. So you guys are awesome. Like the support here is so motivating that it's hard for me to stop. I just want to keep going. I want to do more. I want to talk more. I want to get involved more, and I want to put out more content and work with you guys. And, I'm just really excited to be part of this community. And I don't know. I'm just trying to have, good interaction. And Gray Man, I do want to say thanks for modding tonight. Kanzi, thank you for modding. Urban Grandpa Prepper, thank you for modding. And Gray Man Prepping, another great channel who does a lot of good live streams and does a lot of interviews with other preparedness channels. And yes, I did see that you said I could be invited to be on one of yours, and email me and let's set it up. I'm ready to start doing more of this. I want to be more involved with the community, and I just want to get out there and talk to you guys more. This is where it's really fun. Making videos is cool, and I enjoy doing it, and it's something that I feel like, I don't know, hopefully adds some kind of benefit to whatever it is you're trying to do in the sense of preparedness. But doing live streams and actually talking with people who have expertise or advice or suggestions or opinions definitely helps me develop more as well. So then I can come back from that and share with everybody the next time around. So stuff that I definitely want to do. Randall Smith, can I get a shout out? Magic Prepper. Dang, you got me. I guess you did. I follow several different preppers. Really like your channel. Upbeat, and shout out to Cincinnati. You're welcome, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like I said, I try to get in the chat, guys. It's hard to see everything cruising by, but I do try to see it. And let's see. Steve F says, if you haven't already, maybe a video on what you envision the first week, month after SHTF scenario, rural versus urban. I am going to actually be touching on that soon, based on the video I put out about them coming for the rural communities, which I know a lot of people had some backlash to, especially, like I said before earlier in this live stream, like the "it will never happen here" crowd and "never happen to me" crowd, which we know is not the best way to be, prepared, at least in your mindset. That backlash came from that, and I want to address, like, moving from there, how they would accomplish some of those goals in the sense of containing a giant rural population. So I do have a video that I'm working on for that, and I think that will be somewhat along the lines of that same style of video, talking about, like, that first few days, that first couple of weeks, and that first month, and then what happens after that, and kind of talking about, yeah, we know what they're going to do in the cities. It's easy to, perimeter a city and maintain, the traffic ways and the roadways. And when you have cities, that are islands, and you just have to worry about a couple bridges and you have to worry about waterways, well, then, things get a little bit easier. But when you're talking about rural America and vast swaths of land that are basically unincorporated, well, how do you deal with that? So I will be working on that, and I am hoping to get that out pretty soon here. But you guys are the best. I really appreciate everything you guys do. And like I said, it's super motivating to come here, to talk to all of you, and have all this support. And it's what really keeps me rolling right now, other than, straight black coffee, which definitely helps too. But there's nothing better than dealing with this community. You guys are super awesome. And like I said, magicprepper@gmail.com. I will do my best to get back to you. And if I don't for a while, it's because at some point I'm going to be digging down into my inbox and going, oh, crap, I didn't see that, and sending it over. And then hopefully we can, communicate at least a little bit. And, and if you send me questions about things, and I've seen some questions come through that I haven't got to address yet, I'll either do my best to give you an informed answer on the stuff you're looking for, or I will just tell you that I'm not the right guy to ask, or that you need to kind of do your own research in order to understand exactly what it is you need. Because not always am I going to have the answers for what you need specifically in the sense of, equipment to, keep your house up and running during emergencies or whatever else it might be. But I am willing to at least give it a shot. So You guys are the best. I am going to call it a night, and I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, you got some good information from this chat. Watch out for urban areas, and if you're in a city, please do us a favor and keep us posted on how things are going. And I'll tell you what, the way I got out of the East Bay and the way I left California was literally by looking for job posts on Indeed and using my keyword as relocation. And relocation packages were the jobs that I looked at and the jobs I applied for. And I eventually got one that offered the relocation I needed to get out of there. And so when you don't have to fully come out of pocket to leave, which is a huge part of why a lot of people feel they're stuck, that makes a big difference. And yes, sometimes things take sacrifice. And would I say that we sacrifice the amenities of living in the East Bay area of California to move to rural North Dakota? Yeah, of course we did. Of course we don't have access to all these little luxuries we had before. But is our quality of life much better, and is this a much better place for us to be? I 100% think so. So just wanted to mention that, give you guys a tidbit to think on, and maybe a little tip on how to get out of your situation. And if you have anything else at all, please just let me know. Otherwise, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper, which I have to do.